Time is a weird thing. Time is a weird thing on this episode of Battle Guides featuring Luke. Luke is a fast and adaptive brawler who makes use of a variety of weird effects in order to overwhelm his opponents. However, this comes at the cost of lacking range, needing resources, as well as having generally weak stats. Luke's unique ability is Temporal Battery. Luke starts the game with 2 time tokens and gains 1 at the end of each beat, up to a maximum of 5. During the ante phase, Luke may ante any number of time tokens and gains different effects depending on how many he antes. Note that none of these effects are stackable and you only get for the amount you ante. So, say you ante 3, you'll only get token ante 3 effect, not token ante 1 effect. Now, if you ante 1 token, you get priority plus 1. If you ante 3 tokens, start of beat, you can advance up to 2 spaces. And if you ante 5 tokens, Luke becomes active player that beat regardless of priorities. This unique ability is very interesting, especially for a brawler type character. You see, this is an escalation unique ability that gives you resources every single turn, which means that over the course of a match, Luke gets scarier and scarier up until he has all 5 of his time tokens. This seems very similar to Cesar from Devastation of Indines, as he too is an escalation character, although he's a juggernaut. Now, with this unique ability, it's all about biding time. With Luke, strangely enough, you don't always want to brawl it out with your opponents, and sometimes just getting in for a quick stun to delay more turns and get more time tokens is key to playing him correctly. This unique ability also allows Luke to do a multitude of things that certain characters can't. Specifically his token 3, actually every single one of his token antes does one thing: adapt his cards. You see, the thing is, a lot of people, including myself, thought that Luke was nerfed heavily from his previous iteration. As you can tell, this is a new iteration of Luke with much weaker effects. However, this simply brings to light a strength of Luke that he has always had, but we've never really fully exploited or made use of, simply because his cards were just too amazing on their own anyway. With this in mind, Luke's unique ability is used to adjust bases. This simply means that by doing your ante 1, 2, or 3, you're able to basically make almost any base work. And by work, I mean hit the opponent in the face, because that's what you usually want to do in BattleCON. You have a strike or a grasp and you're at range 3 or far away from the opponent, simply ante 3 time tokens and you're there. You can hit your opponent with an effective range of 1 to 3, which is the magic number for range. So with this in mind, you are able to basically never get card lock. With enough time tokens, any slow attack becomes fast and any attack without range suddenly gets range. So you can do stuff like a really fast shot or a ranged strike. Things like this are very important, especially in high-level games of BattleCON, as you will need to maximize your resources as much as possible. And with Luke, mistakes can be easily made up for, as even if you card lock yourself, you are still able to make up for that by using your unique ability. Don't forget that, as this is very crucial in playing Luke, and we'll talk over that later on in the advanced strategies section. Now let's talk about Luke's styles. First up is Chrono, and Chrono is really good. It's really fast and has a start of beat effect that allows you to spend tokens and advance that many spaces, equal to the number of tokens you spend, of course. Now this is very good as it allows Luke to get in. Being that he has a lack of range, as you can see later on with the rest of his styles, this is crucial to the way Luke plays, as you want to get in as much as possible in order to access some of your better options, such as your unique base Flash. With this in mind, you can spend a lot of tokens to get in and hopefully make that opponent miss. Do know that a lot of ranged attacks are oftentimes very slow. So this gives you the great chance of getting in really fast without your opponent activating their attack yet, and then stunning them or potentially making them miss because of their minimum range. This is very very good, and I cannot stress how great this is. However, this has a stipulation that says you can't move past your opponent, which means that you can't use this as a corner cross. As an added note, note that this start to beat effect choice comes after you see your opponent's attack pair. This is one good thing about Luke's adaptability in a sense. You don't have to commit all of your time tokens when doing this attack. So, if you do have the need to use this attack, you're able to simply, well, look at your opponent's attack, check how much you need, and anti the minimum amount required. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this with Flash, because it will stun out those pesky stun guards. Or Drive, so that you don't have to spend as much tokens to get in. Next up is Eternal. Eternal is slow, has Soak 1, and when you are hit, you can spend any number of time tokens in order to gain Soak 1 for each time token spent. This is really good. Although this minus priority is really big, and I think that it could afford to have more priority, this is really good because of the same reasons that Chrono is good. It's adaptive. You can look at your opponent's attack, and when you're hit, you can just say, okay, I'll spend this many time tokens. And besides, you will always have that Soak 1, even if your opponent does something weird and whatever, and you can't spend time tokens for some reason, you always have that Soak 1 regardless of how many time tokens you spend. This means that it's a really good defensive style on a brawler type character, which barely any brawlers usually have. This time, Eternal is very good, especially if you're up against characters who have very small amounts of power, namely speedsters. However, note that this is a choice, so you can discard 0 and gain no Soak, because sometimes you want to preserve your time tokens. Remember that when it comes to Luke, his time tokens are his life and blood. He has to preserve them well, because if he does not, he is a really mediocre character. When it comes to attack pairs, I highly suggest pairing this thing with Shot, because the Soak 1 plus Stun Guard 3 is Magical Stun Guard 3, so that's very good. On the other hand, I also suggest pairing it with Burst, as Burst is already naturally slow and works without the priority. Next up is Memento. Memento is very good on Luke because by spending 2 time tokens, you are able to repeat your attack. That doesn't seem that good, and I highly agree with that. However, the thing about this card is that you are able to basically double up on any of your triggered effects on your cards. So let's say you play a Memento Drive, that technically turns Drive into a range 1 to 5 attack, which is very good when it comes to dealing with your opponent. Of course, other things like multiple hitting grasp are a very good idea as well. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly suggest pairing this attack with Drive for the hit confirm, or if you want a big payout attack, Strike is your boy. Next up is Fusion, and this is literally Luke's best style in my opinion, because not only is this thing fast, the on-damage effect is devastating. If you deal enough damage to your opponent, they will be pushed back a far distance, and if they would be pushed past the edge of the arena, they get pushed to the edge of the arena and take 2 life loss. This technically translates into a power plus 2, and that is super good. Because if you think of it as a power plus 2 priority plus 1 attack, you will see how insane this can be. Note that you can pair this with your 3 token anti to switch sides with your opponents before you attack, which means that if you're cornered, you can switch sides and then smack them to the wall, which is a very awesome thing to do. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, this thing pairs very well with Grasp, because you're able to push them for that extra distance just in case you want to hit them into the wall really badly. Or Drive, because you need the extra hit confirm for this thing to hit very well. Next up is Fainting, and Fainting is a brawling style on Luke. It's very slow, and it has some minimum range, but start to beat, you retreat 1 space. This is very good because it allows you to dodge your opponent's attack, and the end of beat effect allows you to get back into melee range where you absolutely love it. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly suggest pairing this thing with Strike, because Strike can afford to be slow, or pair it with a Burst so that you can get as far away as possible to dodge as much as possible. And finally, we have Luke's unique base. Flash! Flash is a small range, small damage, really fast base, and it ignores stun guard. Start a beat, you get to advance 1 space. What is there to say? You use this in melee range, get in, stun them. It's a stun gun attack, and oftentimes it doesn't deal a lot of damage because what it's useful for is stalling beats. You stall the beat using this card, and you are able to basically gain 1 time token in the process. Note that any beat with Luke that you are able to stun the opponent, delay a turn, or dodge the opponent is a beat where you gain time tokens. So make sure to remember that and use Flash when you think your opponent can't dodge it. Luke's overdrive finishers are Temporal Recursion and Stasis Charge. Temporal Recursion is a moderately mediocre overdrive finisher, but it advances up to 1 space, and then after activating, you can repeat this by spending a time token. This is very good because if you have all of your time tokens, this thing deals 15 damage. No problem. But remember that Soak still messes your day, and also remember that your unique ability still applies to this, so if for some strange reason you need the extra priority or you need the extra hit confirm, you can use this. Do note that you don't have to hit with this attack to repeat it, so if your opponent is a little bit away, you can spend the extra time tokens to get nearer and nearer to them. And if that's not your thing, Stasis Charge might be your thing. It's a damaging, slow, overdrive finisher with Stun Guard 4. Now, whenever your opponent activates a triggered effect, so stuff like before activating blah, on hit blah, you negate that effect and gain a time token instead. So you can see a dichotomy between Luke's 2 overdrive finishers. One is for when he has a lot of tokens, and the other one is for when he does not have a lot of tokens. If you're a newbie to this game, I highly suggest you pick the one that, you pick Stasis Charge, because this one works especially well if you don't have a lot of tokens. Plus, the Stun Guard 4 is above Magical Stun Guard 3, which means that you can almost always retaliate against your opponent if they're in melee range. Now when it comes to his special action, Luke is a brawler, which means that oftentimes Cancel and Pulse are his best friends. Cancel allows Luke to take advantage of lowering his opponent's options, which is very good for any brawler, trust me. And Pulse allows him to reposition the board if said opponent goes too far away from him and he doesn't have enough time tokens to teleport near. Now let's move on to the part that everybody loves, Luke Advanced Strategies and Combos. Luke Advanced Strategies are very advanced. It's really weird because it took a certain someone to remind me about one strength Luke had that I neglected for so long, and I told you guys about this earlier. It's as simple as adaptability. Luke has strangely a lot of adaptability. All of his styles might require some form of time token spendage to work. However, all of his styles allow him to take advantage of any bad situation. You're stuck at range with only a grasp and a strike in your hand. With stuff like Chrono, or even his token 3 anti, you're able to make the best out of a bad situation and still get in on the opponent and whack them with your strike. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Luke can make any base hit depending on the proper selection of styles and the proper number of antis. This is very important, as even his 1 token anti, the 1 prio, can make a huge difference. See that your opponent's highest priority is a 6. If you're able to get at least 1 priority above them, well, you win the priority check, which makes you active player. Heck, even if you can't win the priority check by numbers alone, you can spend 5 token antis and become active player anyway. This is very, very important when it comes to playing Luke, and I can't believe that I have personally neglected to realize this. As Luke, mistakes are easily made up for. Remember that. As Luke, it's okay to make mistakes. Because of your unique ability and your styles, it's very easy to still get back into the game because you can anti a specific number of tokens and use a specific style, and nearly any base in his kit has the potential to hit the opponent, especially if they don't have burst in hand. Now that's my second tip about Luke. Burst is your worst enemy and also your best friend. It's your worst enemy because it will destroy anything, almost everything you play. But it's also your best friend because the moment your opponent uses their burst and that their burst is comfortably sitting in their discard pile, you are a monster. You will just wreck your opponent's day. They won't know what's happening. All of your start to beat advances will be like you're teleporting everywhere, which is, I guess, the thing they were going for when making Luke. Now, this is very important. A lot of your high beats should happen after your opponent bursts. So time your high beats correctly. Make sure that your opponent's burst is down when all of your strongest options are in your hand. That is a good Luke player skill thing. So that's a mark of a good Luke player. Remember that. And finally, number 3, you can corner cross with Luke every turn. Not every turn, but as long as you have 3 time tokens, you can corner cross with Luke by spending 3 time tokens. This is very important as you can do something like 3 token anti into burst or other things like that when your opponent might not know that you can. Because if you're up against a wall and you use your 3 token to move here and then you burst away, your opponent possibly can't hit you anymore because they weren't expecting you to go that far away. This is very important, although very nuanced. It's very, 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 very important as it can win you a beat or multiple beats. And 1-1 beat is very, very good for any character. Trust me. Resource management. This thing comes last because it's not as hard as other escalation characters. You simply have to wait. Bide your time and make sure that you have enough tokens to deal with what your opponent's about to throw at you. Note that a lot of your options are only good if you have enough time tokens to make them work, so watch out for that. As with any escalation character, dash is your friend, and if you feel like you have a bad hand, don't worry, just dash a terrible card away and gain a time token for your troubles. Now let's move on to some Luke combos. These are pretty simple. Number 1, Fusion Drive. Amazing. You'll push your opponent to the edge of the board, put them away from you, preventing them from retaliating, and then they get dealt extra 2 damage. Really, really good. Good hit confirm, good stats overall. Next up is Fainting Burst. And Fainting Burst is really powerful as it allows you to dodge nearly anything but a shot. So be careful if your opponent's shot is in hand, but if it's down, feel free to play this attack almost any time as you'll dodge almost any time. As an added bonus, you get to come back near and still be in melee range to wreck your opponent's day. And finally, we have Eternal Shot. Eternal Shot might not be the most statistically appealing looking attack, but it's really powerful and it can ruin your opponent's day because of the fact that you can adjust the amount of soak it has. Which means that depending on how many time tokens you have, you can simply have nearly around effective stun guard 8, which is really, really powerful because you're not wasting any time tokens just by playing it. You only have to commit the time tokens if you feel like you need to, and that adaptability and resource management is very, very important to the way that Luke plays. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides. I hope you guys enjoyed Luke. Personally, before making this guide, I thought Luke was completely bad. Like, really bad. But upon further inspection, some testing, and a few inspiration from certain people out there, thank you, I'm able to see that Luke does have certain strengths that I did not value before, but now, my eyes have been opened and I can see how Luke can do things even if they're not as good as his pre-nerf incarnation was. Now, if you like this video or want to learn more about BattleCON, level 99 games, the awesome people who made this game, check the description out below. Want to talk to me or any of the other BattleCON veterans? Check the description out below for our forums as well as my email. And if you want to give me any comments or suggestions, just go to the comment section down below and tell me. I'll be happy to respond as soon as possible. That pretty much does it for this episode. Don't forget your special action, and thank you, World of Indines. Thank you and good night.